Do you believe you're in control of your mind? That every thought passing through your head is the result of your own will? Think again. What if I told you that the consciousness you call I might just be the echo of something deeper? That the ego, that inner voice insisting on narrating your life, is nothing more than a well-crafted illusion, a mechanism of the mind trying to convince itself that it controls the uncontrollable. Nietzsche once provoked, "A thought comes when it wants, not when I want." And Socrates would add in his serene tone, "Know thyself." But what happens when we realize that perhaps even the self trying to know itself isn't truly ours? We live in an age where thought has become a product. Social networks shape how we feel, algorithms decide what we desire, and constant comparison hijacks our freedom. We call it progress, but is it really evolution, or just conditioning disguised as choice? The modern mind lives in noise. It pulses with overstimulation, yet empties itself of meaning. The more it tries to control, the deeper it sinks into the chaotic flow of thoughts it never asked to have. The quest for self-knowledge has turned into a race with no finish line. But what if true awakening isn't about thinking more, but thinking less, simply observing, letting thought reveal itself like a river that flows effortlessly without needing effort, without needing an owner? What you're about to discover may shake the foundation of what you call reality. Prepare yourself, because maybe, just maybe, you've never really thought, you've only been thought. Imagine a turbulent sea. The waves crash endlessly, and you believe you're the surfer mastering them. But what if, in truth, you were the water itself, moved by invisible winds? That's what thought is. It rises, collides, and fades. And yet, we insist on believing we're the captain of this inner sea. Ignorance lies in mistaking the movement of the mind for the will of the self. In daily life, it manifests subtly. You open your phone just for a minute, and before you know it, half an hour is gone. There was no conscious choice, only an impulse disguised as decision. It's the illusion of control, a mind reacting, not acting, an ego operating on autopilot. Nietzsche would call this the theater of consciousness, where the actor believes he is the director. And Socrates, with gentle irony, might ask, if you don't know where your thought comes from, how can you claim it is yours? The modern mind answers with uncomfortable silence. The consequence of this blindness is profound. We lose inner freedom. We become prisoners of our own mental noise. Every unobserved thought becomes a shackle, and the more we struggle to control the mind, the more control slips away, like sand between our fingers. The Socratic solution is not to dominate, but to question, to observe, to allow thought to reveal itself without the rush to censor it. When the mind is contemplated with presence, the flow slows down. In that space, self-knowledge begins to bloom. Know thyself is not an invitation to the intellect, but to silence. It is in the stillness between thoughts that the true self reveals itself, not the character, but the observer behind it. And you? Have you noticed how much you try to control the uncontrollable? Share in the comments. Do you think, or are you being thought? Imagine a fogged mirror. You try to see your face, but only shadows appear. That's how we live, confusing mental reflections with real identity. The ego is that distorted mirror. It creates images, stories, narratives, but never shows what we truly are. In the digital world, the ego has found a stage. Every like is a breath of validation. Every absence, a wound. We live in a marketplace of identities where everyone strives to prove their importance. The consequence? Anxiety, comparison, existential fatigue. We are present everywhere, except within ourselves. Seneca once wrote, "He who lives for applause dies at every boo." And isn't that exactly what we feel when the ego dominates us? A constant oscillation between euphoria and emptiness, between approval and fear. The mind becomes a hostage of the image it creates and forgets the essence that exists before any mask. Ignorance is believing that the ego is the self. The consequence is losing the freedom to be spontaneous. The philosophical solution lies in detachment, not as renunciation of the world, but as liberation from the need to appear. When we stop seeking approval, we begin to seek truth. And truth, as Socrates would say, is not found outside, but within the one who dares to question himself. Look within and ask yourself, who are you when no one is watching? Share in the comments. Do you live or do you play a role? The mind is like an eternal fire, beautiful, intense, but capable of consuming anyone who approaches it without awareness. We live inflamed by repetitive thoughts, feeding emotions whose origins we can't even trace. Ignorance resides in this cycle, thinking without realizing that one is thinking. How many times have you found yourself reliving an old scene, a mistake, a shame? It's thought using you as fuel. It convinces you that reliving is understanding, but it's only mental imprisonment. The past repeats itself not because it's strong, but because it's unconscious. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to us, but what we think about what happens to us that hurts us." That is the modern wound, a hyperactive mind, disconnected from the present, believing that emotional control is born from repeating thoughts, when, in truth, it comes from observing them. The consequence of this blindness is existential fatigue. People exhausted not from work, but from thinking too much. The solution lies in surrender, letting go of control, observing without judgment, allowing the flow of consciousness to follow its natural course. Self-knowledge begins when we stop fighting what we feel. When fire is observed, it illuminates. When it's repressed, it consumes. And are you using your mind or is it using you? Plato described a cave where men mistook shadows for reality. Today, the cave is digital. The shadows are opinions, comparisons, endless feeds. We live trapped in a reality projected by the mind, believing it to be the real world. Ignorance lies in confusing perception with truth. The consequence, losing awareness of the present moment. We chase after images, the ideal body, the ideal career, the ideal love. Everything ideal, nothing real. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." But what if what we repeat isn't action, but distraction? The habit of running away from oneself is the most modern form of slavery there is. The way out of the cave begins with reflection. To ask, why do I believe what I believe, is the first step toward inner freedom. The external world changes, but perception changes first. And what if the cave isn't a physical place, but a way of thinking? Do you want to leave or remain comfortable in the shadows? And what if everything you believe yourself to be never existed? What if the I you defend so fiercely is just a dream of the mind? What if true awakening is, paradoxically, the death of the self? Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But what happens when life is examined to the point of dissolving the one who examines? This is the abyss of truth, the moment when the mask of the ego falls and only silence remains. Nietzsche called it the death of God, but perhaps he spoke of the death of illusion within us, the end of the idea of an I separate from nature. The universe thinks through you, life moves through you. You do not think, you are being thought. This realization is not comfort, it is liberation. Total surrender of control is the birth of spontaneity, of life without fear. And when the I dies, what remains is peace. Would you have the courage to let your old self die to discover who you truly are? If you've understood this far, comment, "Wisdom is power." Now we continue with the second half of the script, topics 6 to 10, maintaining the philosophical motivational tone and the Socratic voice with echoes of Nietzsche. These topics move from the climax toward the closing of the reflective journey, culminating in the final conclusion. Imagine a river flowing among rocks, branches, and leaves. It does not choose its path, it simply flows. Life is that river. And we, when we insist on swimming against the current, suffer. Ignorance is believing we own the current. The consequence is the chronic fatigue of the soul. In the rush of modern life, we seek control in everything: time, emotions, people, results. But the more we try to control, the further we drift from freedom. Thought becomes a whirlpool, and the ego, the stubborn swimmer who refuses to be water. Seneca said, "He who submits to nature is never its slave. Surrender to life, and it will guide you. Resist it, and it will drag you." The secret is understanding that consciousness is not force, but flow, and that wisdom lies not in domination, but in navigation. The philosophical solution is conscious surrender, to stop fighting reality and align yourself with it. When thought becomes still, the mind returns to its natural state, that of clarity. The river flows and the sailor rests. And you, have you been flowing with life or fighting against it? We live in a theater: lights, applause, cameras. Each of us wears a mask to fit the role the world demands. But as Nietzsche once said, become who you are. And that is the hardest of all tasks, for it requires dismantling the entire stage. Ignorance is believing that the gaze of others defines the value of the self. The consequence is living a mirrored existence, shaped by expectations. The modern mind has become a showcase, always visible, rarely genuine. In the age of social media, being has given way to appearing. Comparison is the new religion, and the ego its priest. But Socrates would remind us, the opinion of the many does not matter, only that of truth. The crowd does not seek wisdom, it seeks distraction. The solution lies in detachment from approval. When we stop trying to impress, we begin to express. Spontaneity is born when the fear of rejection dies, and at last, we breathe in the lightness of authenticity. Do you live for applause or for truth? Close your eyes. There is something between one thought and the next, a subtle, almost imperceptible interval. That's where self-knowledge resides. Silence is not the absence of thought, but the presence of awareness. Ignorance lies in seeking answers in words, while wisdom dwells in the spaces between them. The consequence is excess of ideas, of noise, of distraction. We live as those trying to hear a symphony amidst a chaotic traffic jam. Epictetus taught, "No man is free until he masters his own mind." To master here does not mean to control, it means to observe thought until you realize that it is not you, that there is something greater, silent, still, eternal, witnessing everything. The solution is to cultivate presence, to breathe, to feel, to exist. In the silence between two thoughts, truth reveals itself, the mind dissolves, and the being unfolds. Have you ever heard the sound of your own silence? We long for freedom, yet we fear it. We want to be ourselves, yet without disappointing anyone. And so, we remain trapped by what we call freedom, a concept tamed by fear. Ignorance lies in confusing freedom with unlimited choice. The consequence is chaos. The more options we have, the less we know who we are. The paradox is simple. Only those who are free from themselves are truly free. Nietzsche said, "Freedom is the will to be responsible for oneself." But responsibility is not a burden, it is awareness. When the ego ceases to command, the true self emerges, light, spontaneous, natural as the wind. The philosophical solution is detachment from the character. We don't need more external freedom, we need less internal imprisonment. The self dissolves, and what remains is flow, life in its purest form. Do you want freedom, or just permission to remain captive? If this reflection resonates with you, like this video and subscribe to continue this philosophical dialogue. We've reached the end of the labyrinth, and what we find is not an answer but a mirror, only this time it's clear. The reflection shows what has always been there. You, before ideas, before stories, before beliefs. The final ignorance is believing that awakening is an achievement. The consequence is to keep searching for what was never lost. The solution is to realize that consciousness never slept. It only dreamed it was waking up. Socrates would end this dialogue with serenity. Wisdom begins in the admission of one's own ignorance. To recognize that we know nothing is the beginning of peace. For one who has nothing to prove has nothing to lose. Truth is not new, it is eternal. The mind quiets, the flow softens, and silence finally speaks. Are you ready to stop searching and simply be? It is not emptiness, it is presence. The same presence that has been here since the beginning, merely forgotten beneath layers of noise, ego, and illusion. You are not the thoughts that pass through you, nor the emotions that carry you away. You are the space where all of this happens. The silent consciousness that observes the world without getting lost in it. Socrates would say that true wisdom is born when we stop pretending we know. And Nietzsche would add, he who gazes too long into the abyss discovers that the abyss gazes back. But perhaps what gazes back is the very truth we have always been. The human mind is fascinating, yet dangerous when we forget that it is only a tool, not the master of the house. Freedom, after all, is not the power to think whatever we want, but the power not to be prisoners of what we think. To be free is to be able to fall silent and still exist. If this reflection made you question who truly thinks within you, then the Socratic dialogue has fulfilled its mission, not to give you answers, but to awaken new questions. If something within you awakened today, comment, I am the silence between thoughts. Let's continue this dialogue together. Subscribe to the channel and share this video with those who still believe that thought owns the mind. Perhaps just like you, they will discover that life has always been thinking through us. And remember, the next step may reveal something even deeper, perhaps the very moment when silence finally answers you.